All right. Welcome to another episode of The Fundable Founder. I'm here today with Steph Speirs of Solstice Power. Welcome, Steph.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Great to have you on and really looking forward to hearing your origin story and your fundraising strategy. But first, why don't you tell us what is Solstice? What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure. So the problem that Solstice is trying to solve is the fact that 4 out of 5 Americans can't actually put solar on their own home. They can't put it on their own rooftop for a variety of reasons, like they're a renter or a condo owner, or there's a tree covering their roof, or the roof is facing the wrong way or made out of the wrong materials.
Right.
And so you kind of have to be a unicorn to put solar on your home. And you should do it if you're one of the unicorns. But
Right.
for everyone else, for the 4 out of 5 Americans that can't do it, we offer them something called community solar. So community solar is, rather than put it on your rooftop, you buy a portion of a neighborhood shared solar farm instead. The electricity flows back to the grid, but you as a subscriber get credited on your bill for the solar that's produced by your portion. And the reason why it's affordable and accessible is because you don't pay anything upfront. You're not putting anything on your home, and you're actually guaranteed a discount compared to what you were paying your utility in most states in the country. So it's actually affordable and accessible clean energy. Solstice connects households and businesses to local shared solar farms, and our software platform handles the customer experience for the life of the 20-year project.
Got it. Got it. And I know when we first met, it was the first time I had heard about community solar, and it just seems to make so much sense. But why'd you decide to focus on this? Well, what's kind of the origin story behind Solstice?
Yes, from day one, Solstice has always been obsessed with how do we make solar so easy and so affordable that everyone can do it. And by everyone, we mean truly everyone. I was actually the child of immigrants and a single mom who earned minimum wage and had a hard time paying for the electricity bill. And it was always a question of which bill to pay in what month.
Sure.
And now we live in an era where if you can get access to solar power, you can also save money on your electricity bills.
Right.
The problem is it's just not very accessible right now. So Solstice wants to get solar to everyone, but we also care and have acted to get it in the hands of low income and Black, Indigenous people of color. That's a big part of why we exist as an organization, is to give opportunities to non-dominant groups.
Yep.
And under-resourced populations. And so the origin of Solstice stems from a desire to address both climate change and inequality, because at the end of the day, we're never going to solve climate change until we democratize access to clean energy.
That's amazing. And so the origin, I mean, is this something you've been thinking about since you were 10 years old, or is this something that, you were in school and you heard about community solar and you're like, oh my God, I can put all this together and have a win-win?
Yeah. I didn't start out thinking that I was going to be running a solar and software company at all. I never even thought I would be an entrepreneur, because my dad was actually a failed entrepreneur and I only
Okay.
saw the bad side of entrepreneurship, actually. I had always wanted to work for the National Security Council at the White House. And I
Okay.
was lucky enough to have that job during the Obama administration. I worked on Middle East policy during the Arab Spring years.
Wow.
And I was in the Middle East and saw that our addiction to oil
Right.
was just crippling and unhealthy. And the geopolitics of oil were so broken. And we needed to get beyond the business as usual of oil production and fossil fuel dependence. But there weren't enough people, when I looked around, that had access to clean energy. And it seemed like, solar was becoming a sexy and sexier topic, but no normal person, no ordinary person who wasn't really highly affluent
Right.
or a homeowner had solar power. And so my co-founders and I said, wait, let's work on this back home in our backyards. Let's make sure we get more people access to clean energy. Let's make it easy, less confusing. Let's have good software that makes it a seamless experience. And so that's how we started Solstice. It stemmed from all of our experiences looking around and seeing that there weren't enough people that had signed up for it. And actually, after working on the Middle East, I initially lived in India and Pakistan working on renewable energy access. And that's when I realized that actually back home in America, there are all these people that don't have access. Let's work on that problem.
So did you just dive in head first? Was there like a day where you're like, you know what, I'm going for it?
No, one of the biggest lessons I had as part of this experience is what it meant to have a deep, deep commitment. So I actually was trying to do Solstice at the same time that I was going to business school. That's
Yep.
how I ended up in the Boston area. I was going to business school and doing Solstice full time at the same time. And I felt like I was doing two things at once, and I was going 140%, but each thing I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
getting
yeah,
70% at.
yeah.
So I was going 140% and I was getting a C at life is what it felt like. And so I said, commitment, startups are hard enough without some other distraction. Even when you give yourself fully to a startup, it
Right,
still has that 90% failure rate. So um, unless we have to give 110% to one thing, or else we operate in a world of self-sabotage.
right.
And so startups are about deep commitment, about going all in. And the most beautiful lesson that's come from that experience of saying, okay, I have to just fully go all in on Solstice, is that when we did that, that's when the virtuous cycle of operating happened. Meaning that's when things really started to turn around, is when we gave ourselves completely to the organization and put all our eggs in that basket. And so it's only in deeply committing to something do you give it the chance of achieving that virtuous cycle.
That's great advice. Was there anyone that kind of led you to learn that? Or was that just something you learned on your own?
Yeah, I mean, it's also just working in tandem with my co-founders and
Yep.
seeing. I was in business school at the time, but they were outside of school, and so just wanting them to feel like I was in it as much as they were was really important. And so they taught me that experience. That, and then it was also something that I was learning in my own personal relationships.
Hmm.
Just making sure that the things that you love the most and you care about the most are the things that you're dedicating yourself entirely to without distraction is the best purpose you can have in life.
Right, for sure. And how did you, I mean, how did you touched on something that's important, and that's finding co-founders who are as committed as each other and really forming that team. How did you think about forming the co-founding team, skill sets, commitment, all that sort of thing?
Yeah, and we have had different changes in co-founders over the years, and I
Hmm.
think that one of the lessons that we learned is that you have to find co-founders that really complement each other's skills.
Yep.
That my co-founder, who's our COO at Solstice, Sandhya Murali, I thank my lucky stars that I get to work with her every day because we complement each other's skills. She's better at the operations than I am. And I am better at I just like sales more, and I like going and talking to external folks, and I think I enjoy having the same conversation over and over more, which is a lot of the role of a CEO. But we support each other, and then we trust each other to make decisions that the other one has really very little purview over, right? And so it's
Right.
that in trust that
Trust.
you have your domain and I have my domain, and we're going to lean on each other because we're not going to make big decisions without each other, but we do make a lot of decisions within our domain without having to bother the other person. So
Right.
it's that give and take relationship of knowing when to lean on someone and when to go out and divide and conquer that allows us to work really well together. And it starts with a very acute self-awareness of
Yep.
what are your weaknesses
Yep.
and and what are your strengths, and let's play to our relative strengths.
Well, I was just going to say you're a very self-aware person, but you beat me to it, which means you're more self-aware than I thought you were, I guess.
That is, I think, the number one thing of any entrepreneurial experience is that self-awareness, a really hard
For sure.
conversation about what you're good at and what you're bad at, because the sooner you find teammates that complement what you're bad at, the more you're going to have a well-rounded team that it
Yep.
can address all aspects of a business. Because there's nothing that no founder is going to be good at everything. It's impossible.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's that's a lesson or advice I hear over and over from founders is, recognize what you don't know, seek out advice. I still, I'll be at board meetings for companies that are on their series B and C, and we're still talking about the things that we haven't figured out yet, and the things that we don't
Yeah.
know how to do. And, oh my God, we need to hire this type of person who has this experience because we still haven't figured out customer success. Or, and those are the great conversations, because, the VCs who are on the board are like, oh yeah, this company does it this way and they've got this great person, and that just helps the company grow. But, if a founder comes into a board meeting and says, oh, we knocked it out of the park this quarter, things are great, thanks for coming,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Why are we
doesn't
all
work too
here?
well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think the
yeah,
startups that are most successful are the ones that learn the fastest, not the
yep,
ones that get it right out of the gate, because no startup is going to get it perfectly right out of the gate. And so what the pandemic taught us actually is just to be really, really honest about, one, our blind spots, and
yep.
two, where things are going well and where they're really not going well. And then in talking about what's not going well, we fix them together.
Great. So, look, you've already provided a ton of great advice, but let's wind back the clock a little bit to when you went out to raise your first funds, right? Like the first thing about raising your seed round. Did you raise like a friends and family to get started, or kind of how did that develop?
Yeah, we raised a pre-seed before we
Okay.
raised institutional capital from venture capital funds. And I want to call it a friends and family round, but I don't think we have that many rich friends and family. I think it was a supporters and acquaintances round.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was
So,
people who were betting on you that knew you, right? But
mhm.
you've already told us your great elevator pitch. There was nothing not to like in your elevator pitch, right? So when you went to raise a seed fund, were the VCs just crawling all over themselves to fund you?
That is not, I don't think that any woman of color founder will have the experience where it was just super easy to raise and people were knocking down your door. Um, so outside of, when you are starting out raising funding, I think we overemphasize financial capital because we need it to do our work. And the lesson that I learned slowly over time was that what we should emphasize first is social capital
Okay.
instead of financial capital. Someone told me your first million that you raise is actually going to come from first and second degree connections. It's going
Mm,
to come from everyone who knows you and already trusts you, and then the people that they connect you to because those people trust them.
right.
So that's actually what ended up happening. Is the first people who offered to invest in Solstice were the people on my core team at business school,
Okay.
who they weren't very rich, they didn't have a lot of money, but they said, I would like to put some of my life savings in your company because I've been working with you for the past few months at business school. And that was really eye-opening to me because I was so afraid to take money from anyone I knew. I was so afraid to lose money from people who I respected. And then at some point, when you raise money, you have to get over that because those are the people you raise from.
Right.
And then it becomes almost like a sacred duty that I am the steward of someone's life savings, and that is a sacred duty that I have to take very seriously. And so, what we do with this funding you have to be very judicious about it. But the thing about that is then it grew as a network from those first contacts.
Right.
Another one of our first investors was a fellowship program called Echoing Green, which supports social impact entrepreneurs
Yep.
who are trying to build a better world. And then, another one of our first funders was an alumni from the place where I went to grad school. And
Okay.
he said, that school connections really provided a lot of our initial funding, as well as accelerators who gave us a lot of credibility initially when we were just an idea on paper, as opposed to having customers and revenue like we do now. So it was
Yeah.
really about recognizing that social capital leads to financial capital, and tapping into those communities where people already trust you, and talking to anyone who would listen to you about your idea. That was the first step towards fundraising and getting funding.
It is. And it's a step that a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize, right? Like, even at the seed stage, when you're talking to institutional VCs and angel groups and others, you still have to build that trust. It's a
Yeah.
relationship, and you have to, a lot of people come to us and ask for, they say, hey, we're raising $1.5 million. We want to close in 2 weeks. Are you in? and we say, well, we got to build a relationship here first, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're going to be in this together for 5, 7, 10 years. And we want to know that, that we know who you are and how you operate. And we trust that, you're going to do whatever you can to get this business off the ground and everything else. And we want the entrepreneur to trust us that we're going to be there to help grow the business and not get in the way and other things. And that takes months. It doesn't take weeks. And I actually caution entrepreneurs against taking money from people they don't know, VCs or angels or whoever, who write a quick check, because they're also quick to not support you down the road, right? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Hey, it's great you raise money quickly, but that's not committed capital, right? That's capital that it's, they're buying a lottery ticket, and if they scratch off the first 2 numbers and it's not a 7, then they're out, right? So so you got to be careful and build that relationship. And so when you went to do the seed round, what was the strategy there in approaching VCs and others?
Yeah. So luckily we'd had a lot of good relationships from our pre-seed round. We raised a pre-seed from angels who later on came to be great validators for us. And so, we actually also entered a lot of business plan competitions. And early on, we actually won a business plan competition that was at a entrepreneurship conference hosted by the Obama Foundation. And the winner won investment from Obvious Ventures, which is a large name Silicon Valley VC. And so we won that business plan competition. And then that Obvious Ventures helped make introductions to a bunch of other investors. And then we had built a relationship with, my professor at MIT, Dr. Edward Roberts. He, after I graduated, invested as an angel investor in Solstice, and that gave a lot of people, more confidence in us, because he had been a very successful angel investor. Other angel investors that had invested were Jacqueline Novogratz, who started Acumen Fund, and then Chris Anderson, her husband, that started TED Talks. And so they have incredibly supportive networks. So those connections really led to additional funding. And then the other lesson that I learned from another entrepreneur through the Techstars Boston network, he said that fundraising is 50% the pitch and your business, and it's actually 50% process. And most people forget that it's a process, and you run it like a sales process where you have a sales pipeline and you follow up with that pipeline and you track it in your CRM. And most new entrepreneurs lack that sales rigor when they're first going out. And so taking the lessons of other entrepreneurs and really putting into plan a process with my team of making sure that we are following up and having all our materials prepped, I think that was as influential as selling the actual business and our traction and our team.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the founders I've talked to, they said one of the things that really worked for them was just sending a monthly update to the potential investors, right? Because the idea is you're taking them along on a journey, and those investors are not necessarily investing in a particular point in time. They're investing based on the journey they see, and they want to go on that journey with you. So in your case, it sounds like you found a lot of really like-minded investors who believed in the vision, believed in the mission of what you were doing, the missions, I should say. There's multiple missions here, which is great. But you still have to convince them that that you know how you're going to execute on this business, right? And so they're going to go on that journey with you as they see you execute, and then they're ready to invest when they go, oh my God, she's doing everything she told us she's going to do, and then some, and learning from the mistakes as well, right? And so, I think just keeping that mentality of we're on this journey, and I've got to keep those who are interested updated on how we're doing on that journey, the good and the bad.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And Techstars Boston actually tells all of its cohort companies that you have to do 2 things that are very basic that will help you in fundraising. One is to do monthly investor updates. And number 2 is to create a forwardable blurb and tee up anytime someone says, I'm going to make an introduction for you, just send them something that's easily forwardable, because often people will, with great intentions, promise to make introductions. But if you don't follow up with them and make it easy for them, they just don't get around to it. And so you do the work to help other people open doors for you. And those are the two kind of tried and true things I've seen work over the many years we've been fundraising.
Was there anything that was surprising to you about fundraising that you wish you had known in advance?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was in terms of how the takeaway I've had for a couple of rounds is investors don't really care about you until their friends care about you sometimes. And it's not for lack,
it's so true. Yep.
It's nothing nefarious. It's just that I can imagine as an investor, you're getting pitched all the time from strangers and you have no idea what people are saying, if it's the truth or they're just selling you. And are they credible? Are they backable? Are they people of integrity and character? How can you know all of those things about all the pitches you're getting? And so just having investors live in a very tight community and they talk all the time amongst each other. And so being extremely aware of what the investor community in general thinks about you and trying to make sure that you build relationships of trust across the entire community so that there is a virtuous reputation you have is so important. And I wish that there were more investors who would be willing to take the risk without hearing what their friends thought about you, but I found that to be pretty surprising and true. In that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's human nature or if it's just you're trying to de-risk and say, okay, I think it's a big part of it is just like, I think this is really good, but I just need a little bit of validation from someone else.
Yeah. Because, and we're all social creatures.
I also, as a VC, it's like, you don't want to make a bad investment, right? Like everyone else after you make the investment is like, oh my God, why'd they invest in that? Right.
Yeah.
So, because your reputation is really important as an investor and as an entrepreneur, right? Like, like you said, venture is a small community and people talk and, there'll be times where we're before a board meeting, we'll just be chatting and say, oh, have you looked at Solstice, for example? And most people will say, oh my God, yes, love what Steph is doing. This is great. And you try to help gin up some interest, like, well, we're getting close to writing a term sheet if you're interested and kind of see where they're at. But the flip side can happen too, where someone says, oh, they came in and they bombed their pitch, and it's like, well, okay, that's a bit of information, but I don't know what a bomb is for your organization, but let's try to educate ourselves. So, it is important to maintain that great relationship and the great reputation amongst all the investors if you possibly can. And, having a process will help with that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
As always, these things go very fast in my head, but on the clock, we're at like 23 minutes now. So I do want to wrap up by asking one more question, and that's, how would you describe yourself in one word?
I'm gonna cheat and say two words: delusionally optimistic.
I love it. That is perfectly acceptable. There is, I love it. That's a very original answer as well. So, look, I really appreciate you being on the Fundable Founder today. I think you've given tremendous advice to all the aspiring entrepreneurs out there, and really wish you nothing but success going forward. Please call us when you're raising your next round.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate your time too. Good chatting with you.
You as well.
To innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.